I'm Bia, and welcome back to Cardiac Radio for Teens. For those of you who might not know, Cardiac Radio for Teens is a place where teens can come together with other teens to learn about Spiritist teachings and topics in a way that makes more sense to us and is more relatable to us as teenagers in today's society. While reading the Spirits book together, we have gotten through a lot of the kind of, let's say, scientific part of it and why things happen or what exactly is happening and that kind of stuff, but now we're getting into the moral laws. So we've been talking about moral laws, and last week we left off talking about the law of progress. So why we progress, what's the point of it, do we regress, all these questions that go with the law of progress. So that's where we left off last week, and we left off in the section titled The March of Progress. So that's where we'll start off. But we did already start that section last week, so if you didn't miss it, it'd be good to go back and listen to the last one so that you can kind of refresh your brain and catch up on what we're going to talk about now. So question 782. Aren't there those who obstruct progress out of good faith, believing that they are helping it because from their own point of view, they often see progress where it does not in fact exist? So here's asking, okay, some people, they aren't trying to hold you back from progressing. They're not trying to hold society back, but they truly think in their beliefs that they need to do something to help society progress. So they're trying to do that one thing, but it's actually kind of stopping us from progressing. So what can we say about these people? And the Spirits answered, they are like a tiny pebble under the wheel of a large cart. A tiny pebble cannot keep a large cart from moving. So, yeah, there is going to be spirits who are they're not even with malicious intent. Like, we're not even talking about spirits who are genuinely trying to, like, do something wrong and, like, stop progress. But these spirits, like, they're just not evolved enough. They just don't have enough education because they just don't know yet what is true and what's not. They just truly think that what they're doing is for the best. And they're trying to do what's the best for people, but they don't really see that their way might not be the best. But these people, like they say here, they're just like a tiny pebble under the wheel of a large cart. So just because there's these little obstacles, we can get through them. These people that come 1, 2, 100, these are just tiny obstacles that we're going to overcome and we're going to get over. Society as a whole isn't going to be completely stopped by a few people. But if it is the majority of your society, then that's part of the progress that society needs to earn as well. But if it's just a few here and there, then we have to keep going and kind of teach them the right way and kind of carry them along with us as well. Question 783. Does the perfecting of humankind always follow a slow, progressive march? So we're saying, to get to that perfection of humankind, is it always this, like, slow and steady march? Like, can you get there really fast, or is it always one step at a time, working on this, then working on that? And the Spirits answered, there is a regular slow progress that results from the force of things. However, when a culture does not advance quickly enough, then from time to time, God can cause a physical or moral jolt that transforms it. So what they're saying here is that there's always going to be this slow progress because just by the force of things, just by like how nature is acting upon us, and we talked about the law of nature and how this is applying on us, we are eventually, and how everyone is trying to grow, there's a slow progress that's happening. So although this isn't going to be something that we see clearly, because it's not going to be like, oh, today we're at this stage and tomorrow we're at that stage, this is a slow progress, so it is going to take time, and it's not really clear in our eyes, but it is happening. But however, sometimes there's times that a culture is really resisting even that natural progress that's happening. So if the culture is really not advancing, and when we talk about culture, we can mean a group of people, whether like that they group themselves together or if it's by location or similarities, if there is this group of people that are really not advancing, then the Spirit said here that God can cause a little jolts to them, kind of like shake them up a little bit to help them progress, and trying to catch up to the other people that are progressing while they're staying behind. So God can cause a little jolt in them, a little kind of shake them up a little bit so that culture can start progressing because they're like resisting it. And then Alan Kardec puts his own comment and he says, humans cannot remain forever in ignorance, since they must reach the goal set by Providence. They are enlightened by a force of circumstances. Moral revolutions, like social revolutions, creep into people's ideas little by little. They germinate for centuries and suddenly burst forward, overthrowing and crumbling edifice of the past, which is no longer in accord to the new needs and new aspirations. In such upheavals, people usually do not perceive more than the momentary disorder and confusion that affects their own material interests. Nevertheless, those who raise their thoughts beyond themselves admire the design of Providence, which brings good out of bad. Such upheaval are like the storms and disturbances that leave the atmosphere clean after having disrupted it. So the first great point that he brings up that we should talk about is that this first line that he says, humans cannot forever remain in ignorance. So we can't forever just like be like, oh, I don't know nothing, and oh, I'm not going to do this. It's kind of like kids. Kids can't always be kids because eventually you're going to be an adult and we're going to have to be able to adult. So right now it's okay for us to not know things, but eventually we will have to learn those things and do those things as well. So we can't forever remain in a state of just not knowing or not doing anything. Because we're all going to get to that perfection. So if we're all going to get to that perfection, we must be improving. We can't be stuck all the way down here not knowing anything. So then we see this in societies because sometimes there'll be sets of laws. And okay, those sets of laws will work for a while until finally everyone's like, wait, these laws aren't working. So then we improve them because, as we know, the laws, God's laws are like written in like stone. Like we're not changing them. Those are like the laws that we should follow. But human laws have mistakes and they're not perfect. So we go evolving those laws. And as we go evolving those laws, we go evolving society and many other things. Even if we think about women's rights, we're getting so many rights and we're opening up laws and changing them because we say, oh, okay, wait, this wasn't a fair law from before. And now we're updating it and changing it because our society is progressing. However, some societies are still not allowing that woman's rights. And maybe eventually one of those societies will need one of those jolts to kind of get that moving as well. So we are progressing, and although it may seem slow, it is happening. And also, with these people that kind of have to be jolted, it, like they said, it's like a storm, and it might seem like it's a bad thing for these people, but we have to look at the good of what's happening. And we can see this sometimes in natural disasters that completely like tsunami, that completely like destroys or wipes out an area. Well, maybe it's because that society needed to improve. They needed to maybe become closer as people and become more selfless. So like caring for others more than themselves. So then this happens, and yes, it's terrible, and yes, they need help, but there are also some good things that they're learning from that experience and helping them evolve more and progress. Question 784. Humankind's perversity is great. Doesn't it seem like humans are regressing instead of progressing, at least from a moral point of view? So first, of course, let's look up what perversity means, because that's not really a word we use these days. So perversity is a deliberate desire to behave in an unreasonable or unaccepting way. So doing something by the contrary. So instead of accepting something, you do the opposite to kind of like make a change or show your point. So they're saying, so humankind, we have a lot of this, of doing what you want even though maybe you know it's not the right thing to do, So doing what you want in an unacceptable way, that happens a lot in humankind. So doesn't it seem that in these situations that we're regressing, like we're going backwards instead of progressing and moving forwards? At least morally, like, oh, okay, now you're just gonna revolt and do something just because you can't, like, accept other people's beliefs or something. So saying, doesn't it look like we're going backwards instead of forwards? And the spirits answered, you are mistaken. Observe the whole closely, and you will see that they are advancing, because they have a better understanding of what evil is, leading them day by day to reform their abuses. The excess of evil will make them understand the need for the good and for reforms. So no, we're mistaken. Like we said, we're never gonna regress. We're never gonna go backwards. Not as a society, not as an individual, not as a whole planet. We're never gonna go backwards. We're always gonna be moving forwards. Even if it's little, or even if we're stubborn and we stay in the same spot for a while, eventually we'll move forward. We're never gonna go backwards. And so we're looking at this person, but we should look at that whole person and see other things that are evolving and seeing that maybe these things are happening now because this person is gaining more knowledge of what is good and bad. And because of this, they're kind of like learning and experiencing good and bad now. So it wasn't that they got worse, it's just that they were open to new experiences and new knowledge that they're trying to deal with and overcome. So the main point to take away is that we're never regressing. We're never going to go back. Once we learn something, it's ours forever to keep. Even if we don't remember our past lives, whatever we learned in there, it's in the back of our brains. That's why sometimes some subjects come easier to people, or some people are better at playing an instrument than others, because even though we don't directly remember our past lives, we have that within us. Once we've learned it and perfected it, it's ours to keep. Question 785. What is the greatest obstacle to progress? So, what's the greatest thing that we need to overcome to progress? And the spirits answered, pride and selfishness. I am referring to moral progress, since intellectual progress is always occurring. Progress itself seems, at first glance, to be double the intensity of these two vices by developing ambition and the love of wealth, but this in turn entices persons to pursue research that enlightens their spirit. It is thus that everything is related in the moral world, as well as in the physical, and that good is brought out of evil itself. But this states that things will only last for a while. It will change as people understand the beyond of the enjoyment of earthly wealth. There is an infinitely great and long-lasting bliss. So right here they said the biggest things to overcome, the biggest things for us to progress and move on is pride and selfishness. So being too proud or cocky of what you have, and selfishness of just caring about yourself and not thinking about other people and what other people need. And right now we're talking about moral progress, because intellectual progress is always happening. Because even some people who have malintent, maybe their morals aren't so high, they are still learning, and they are still getting an education and learning these like scientific facts and stuff like that. But it's our morals that are more harder for us to progress on. So although these seems like really big obstacles, like how are we ever gonna be completely not selfish? Like, of course, like we think about, oh, what our family needs, and for a lot of people that's like the extent of how far we can go. Like we can think about what we need or what our family needs, but then like thinking about just anyone in general and thinking about what they need before us, that's a really hard thing to do. But the good thing is that we all will get there once we start understanding that this world is very material, and that beyond this earthly world and this earthly wealth and money and just thinking about ourselves, there's going to be an infinite happiness, an infinite bliss that we get once we reach that state of perfection. So it doesn't matter if we have this quote unquote perfection or happiness, which it isn't, on Earth. It's what's going to be in forever that counts more. What's a one earthly life when we have an infinity of happiness waiting for us? And then Allan Kardec puts his own comment in, and he says, there are two kinds of progress that mutually support each other, but who do not proceed in tandem: intellectual progress and moral progress. Throughout this century, intellectual progress among civilized cultures has received all the stimuli it could desire, and it has reached an unprecedented level. Moral progress has also occurred, although not at the same rate. If we compare the social customs of a few centuries ago with those of today, we would be blind to deny that there has been progress. Then why should the ascent march on morality be interrupted more than that of intelligence? Why should there not be as great a difference in morality between the 19th and 24th centuries that there is between the morality of the 14th and 19th? To doubt this would be to assume that humanity has reached the apogee of perfection, which is absurd, or that it has not morally perfectible, which has been disproved by experience. So here he's just explaining more about how we have this moral progress of societies and individuals progressing morally and intellectual. So knowing things, knowing what's better for humans, knowing science, knowing facts. And as we know, our intelligence, no matter where our morals are at right now, our intelligence, we've grown so much. Think about centuries ago. And now we have cars, airplanes, people on the moon, going to space, going deep underwater. We have all this research, all this science, all this intelligence, and we are intellectually progressing a lot. But this moral progress, we have progressed a lot. If we think about it, what people, even like a few weeks ago when we were talking about the death penalty. The death penalty has come a long way. Before it used to be, okay, anyone who does something wrong, you can kill them. And now we've progressed to having very strict rules of who is going to get this death penalty. So of course, we're not at that perfection yet. We haven't completely gotten rid of it, but we have come a long way. So there is this moral progress, but it doesn't go as fast as our intellectual progress. Because if you think about it, people can be very intelligent, but be using that for evil. So that means their moral progress isn't going so fast as their intellectual progress. So there are these two, and they don't go at the same rate, but it's important to keep in mind that they are going, they are moving, they are progressing, no matter what. And intellectual might be going much faster than moral, but the moral is still progressing. Especially if we look centuries ago to where we are now, we've come so far. Imagine centuries from now where we'll be. So now we're on to the next section in this same chapter, and we're going to be talking about relapsed cultures. So relapse just means like when something got better and then it happened again. So we hear that word a lot with like diseases, or sicknesses. So you got better, but then you relapsed. You got it again and worse. So we're going to talk about cultures that kind of went away and then came back. So question 786. History has shown us many cultures that relapsed into barbarity after shocking events deeply upsetting them. Where is the progress in such a case? So when we're talking about these cultures, they seem to come back, but not only come back, but come back like worse after something. So this seems like not, how does progress work in this if they're coming back worse? And the spirits answered, when your house threatens to collapse, you demolish it in order to build a stronger and more comfortable one. Until it is rebuilt, however, there is trouble and confusion in your dwelling. So what they're saying is, so they're kind of giving us an example. So say your house is going to collapse. You demolish it, and then you build it up stronger and more comfortable. Well, this period that we might say that it's worse, it's them demolishing it and trying to reconstruct it. So yeah, this period might seem worse, but it's just leading to this better version. And then they continue. A further example. You are poor and live in a hovel, but you become wealthy and leave it to live in a palace. Then some poor fellow, as you formerly were, comes and takes your place in the hovel and feels very content because he previously had no shelter at all. Very well. Learn from this that the spirit incarnates in those declining cultures are no longer the spirits who had compromised them during their time of splendor, because they have progressed. Those former spirits have moved into even more perfect dwellings, while less advanced ones have taken their place, which they too will leave behind in their turn. So now we're seeing that although it may seem like, oh, so these people got better, but these people are still in that condition, well, so one of them, let's say one person progressed and they moved on, but now someone else came and take their place. So that's saying, so if we're just looking at the big picture, if we're looking at a community, then this is kind of looks like this community is staying the same because, okay, one person left, but now one person's back. But it's because each person is at a different level of evolution that we have to keep in mind. Each person's at a different level at a different rate. So depending on where each person is, they need to go through each step, and they're just further along, so they could be more evolved or less evolved than others. So that depends on what state we're at and what we're doing to progress. Depends on what we have done already and what we still have to do. Question 787. Aren't there people that, by their very nature, rebel against progress? So aren't there some people who, just because of who they are, they're so stubborn that they don't want to progress at all? Or maybe like they're not even, it's not even in a bad way, but maybe do you ever know someone that refuses to change the way they think because they're so like set on the way they think? And the spirits answered, yes, but they are corporally disappearing day by day. So yeah, there's people who are just completely rebelling against progress and don't want to progress, but those people are kind of, if they're not ready to be at the speed that Earth is, they're going to reincarnate in somewhere else where maybe they'll be the ones that need to help the progression happen so that they can learn that better. And then there's a second part to this question, and it says, what will be the future fate of the souls who animated those people? So okay, so those people who don't want progression, what's going to happen to them? And the spirits answered, like all other souls, they will finally arrive at perfection by passing through many, many existences. God deserts no one. So, okay, even these people who don't want to progress, eventually they're going to get there. Yeah, it's going to take a long, long time, and they might take a longer time than someone else, but eventually they will get to perfection because God isn't going to abandon anyone. And then there's another part to this question, and it says, so the most civilized individuals may have been primitive beings and cannibals? So, okay, so now they're saying, so even the most civilized people that we see, that we look up to, they were once primitive and they were once cannibals and they once were at this very ignorant state? And the spirits answered, you yourselves were much more than once before becoming what you are now. So even us, we were primitive and we were very ignorant and doing wrong things. And not to say that we don't do wrong things, we still have a long way to come, but we've come a long way too. But yes, we all have come from that primitive state, and we've all experienced these things because you don't just be like granted perfection and then that's it and you can just jump ahead to the line. There's no fast pass. You have to go through all these steps and all these obstacles. And even if we look at Jesus, obviously he progressed in a completely different time than us. And while we were like just starting out, he was already reaching that perfection. But even he started in primitive states and had to go through all the obstacles. You don't just get granted access to go to the front of the line and to get to perfection. We all have gone through it and we've all learned from those experiences. So that's where we'll leave off today, and next week we'll continue talking about these relapse cultures and the law of progress. But before we leave off, I'd like to read our message from the Daily Book of Positive Quotations by Linda Bacone. For today's date, May 15th. Doing for others. There is nothing to make you like other human beings so much as doing things for them. We like ourselves better when we help others, but the astonishing thing is that we also tend to like others better. It is sometimes a gift when people allow us to help them. We appreciate the givers of this gift. I will help others and realize that they are giving me a gift that I welcome. If at all you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, anything at all you want to talk about, feel free to email me at cardiacradioforteens@gmail.com and I'll get back to you right away. Also, we have our first International Youth Spiritist Weekend that's happening in July, and if you guys want more information on that, feel free to email me and I'll give you more information, and that'll take place in Washington, D.C. for a weekend, July 7th to 8th, I believe. I'm Bia, and this has been Cardiac Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening. This has been Cardiac Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening.